Welcome to this ATA Insights webinar. Thank you for your ongoing interest and support of our webinar program. Today's session will begin in 2 minutes. ATA Insights Webinars is an online platform for the dissemination of professional renewable energy knowledge across international borders. Our aim is to democratize access to information, for innovation to spread faster, and to make the industry more competitive. And we do this through our online session, open to all our members. Every year we do more than 100 sessions with over 250 speakers, 50,000 attendees from more than 50 countries. To participate in the session today, use the chat on the right-hand side to introduce yourself, your company, and where you're joining from. Under the screen, you will find the Q&A box, where you can send your questions for the speakers. We will get to as many as we can today. We're recording this session, and we will send you a link to the materials in a few days. Please consider supporting our content creation for the webinar program. Contact us on the email on screen.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. Thank you for being with us today for this webinar on solar energy plus storage. So we have a tradition here at ATA Insights, and we ask people to tell us in the chat where they're joining from. We're actually joining from Berlin. So yeah, it's kind of the day sort of like ending for me, but yeah, just tell us where you're joining from, and we'll start the webinar about getting the speakers to introduce themselves. So let's start with Alex. If you can just tell us briefly who you are and where you're joining from.
Thank you, Carlos. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Morris, the Executive Director with the California Energy Storage Alliance. We are a trade association focused on growing the energy storage market in California, and we focus a lot on our work with utilities and all of the developers, both in front of the meter and behind the meter on energy storage. It's great to be with you all today, and I look forward to sharing more about how we're approaching and growing the market for solar plus storage.
Thank you very much, Alex. And you can get ready. I'll ask everyone else to introduce themselves, so you can get ready to share your slides as well, whilst they do. And next up, Matt, if you could tell us who you are briefly, please.
Sure. Thanks, Carlos. I'm Matt Chang-Zedler. I'm the head of product and application engineering for GridStar Flow, which is Lockheed Martin's long-duration utility-scale flow battery. Lockheed Martin is a global security and aerospace company engaged in the development, manufacture, and integration of advanced technology systems. And the flow battery is specifically within Lockheed Martin Energy, which is a portion of our business that delivers energy solutions to advance resilient, clean, and sustainable energy for utility, commercial, industrial, and military applications. And I'm based in Cambridge, Massachusetts on the East Coast.
Thank you very much, Matt. And Carl, please, if you could briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Carl Stills. I'm a vice president for Imperial Valley Development Storage Integration for 8 Minutes Solar Energy. That's in my present life. My previous life, I was 42 years in the public energy sector with Imperial Irrigation District, where I retired from as the energy manager there. So I have a extensive background in energy.
Great, thank you very much, Carl. Well, Alex, if you can, well, we have Jose back. Jose, if you could please introduce yourself.
Yes, I hope you guys can hear me well, because I just lost internet a second ago.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, I can hear you well.
Perfect. Apologies for that. I'm Jose Tellecha from the North American Development Bank. I'm an associate director for project finance here. I've been working in the renewable energy space for the last 10 years, working on projects of over 1.5 gigawatts of both solar and wind and also we finance the 500 megawatt hours of energy storage in California. So happy to be here and appreciate the invite.
Thank you very much, Jose. And well, now we're gonna move on to Alex Morris's presentation. So Alex, whenever you are ready. There we go. I can see your slides. So.
Great. Well, hi everyone. Nice to be here today or this evening, wherever you are located. Again, I'm Alex Morris, the Executive Director with the California Energy Storage Alliance. And we are a trade association focused on growing the energy storage market, serving energy storage technology providers and developers, and anyone else who's involved in the energy storage space in Western United States. I'll share a little bit about CISA. We're an advocacy group whose mission is to advance the role of energy storage and make sure that energy storage is part of the grid toolkit for integrating renewables and achieving climate goals. CISA really is one of the large trade associations focused on energy storage, and California is one of the largest energy storage markets in the world. So we're really privileged to work with so many large companies, so many of the players, including 8-Minute Solar Energy and Lockheed Martin. So welcome to those companies who are here. We also work closely with a lot of the utilities and what we call the buyers in storage. So we're sort of the voice of storage. We advocate for storage, and we create a business environment that's effective for the companies. I hope you'll join, and I look forward to sharing more. A little bit about why California is one of the largest markets, or why it's one of the most important places to focus. Just the nature of California's large economy, which is the 5th or 6th largest in the world, coupled with really stringent clean energy goals, moving towards very high levels of renewables, and winding down the natural gas and older fleet, has created a market fundamentals where storage is necessary. So we've really reached a point where we can't add many more renewables without adding more storage. So we're seeing signals and active contracting to bring storage to market, whether it's solar and storage or battery storage or other types of longer duration storage. We're seeing thousands of megawatts of need in the next 8 years or sooner, and we expect that to continue. So these numbers give you a snapshot of the California market, and we're actually really just getting started. So 200 megawatts last summer, 2,500 megawatts this summer, and we expect that to keep going. And on top of that, we'll be adding 1,000 megawatts of longer duration storage technology, and helping address the CAISO's, our grid operators' needs with storage, doing fast regulation service, but then also providing capacity and providing deep energy shifting. And we'll talk about how adding storage to solar helps with the energy shifting piece. Just as a reminder, CISA is technology neutral, so we try to create a market where everyone can compete. These are the various types of technologies that are represented in CISA. So if you have a technology or you want to work with any of them, that's fine. And we welcome all these technologies. And we think a healthy market tends to have some diversity in it, including solar plus storage and standalone storage. And so solar and storage is an obvious combination that go very well together, like peas and carrots, as Forrest Gump made famous. And really, this is a picture that many of you have probably seen of California's net load curve, and really how we have to dispatch our power plants to meet the load. And what you see is that there are steep ramps and periods of overgeneration of solar. And this chart really, in a simplistic way, shows how the storage in a deep cycling application or connected with solar can absorb the extra power in the middle of the day and then start to discharge in the evening. We call that absorbing the belly of the duck and then discharging at the head of the duck. And what that does is it not only helps provide the energy needed to run the system, but it reduces the overall net ramping needs, which is very important. And so when you have solar and storage, you can maximize the tax benefits by capturing a federal investment tax credit. And then you can also build your solar systems to not only feed the electric grid, but also feed the storage system, which then can shift the output of some of your storage to later in the evening when it's much more valuable. So this is a very compelling business model. It's very prevalent in California and will be prevalent throughout the western and southwestern United States. And CISA has been in the middle of a lot of this, including market participation structures for all of that. So some of the roles we've had and why I think we're a relevant party for this discussion is we've helped pioneer the market participation paths for solar plus storage resources. We call that hybrid resources. And we were the group that's engaged with our California Independent System Operator to develop market participation models. On top of that, the CAISO now serves as the market participation platform for much of the entire Western United States, and it does that through the energy imbalance market. So this work has had the ability to amplify all of the places you would cite solar plus storage. We've also been directly and intimately involved in studying how to value capacity additions when you take solar and you add storage. How does that improve the overall capacity value? And if you develop grid resources in the Western United States, much of how you monetize that is through the capacity value. So that's a very important value stream that we've been focused on. On top of that, interconnecting and setting up the station power rules and single line engineering diagrams for solar plus storage has been very important, and CISA is in the middle of that, having fun. And then thinking how these resources fit with our longer term planning models. And these planning models use sophisticated modeling programs to identify what some of the best or smarter strategies for planning our electric system and achieving our green energy or clean energy goals would be. And so factoring and representing solar plus storage in those models is very important. Finally, we work with all of the buyers, like our utilities or our community choice aggregators or our load serving entities, who are actively working to bring storage online. And we work with them to support competitive solicitations so that our CISA members, being the industry side, can show up and have places to compete to sell services. And then finally, we work very actively with state and community leaders on education and advisory services, helping them wrap their head around how storage is going to help them. And so those are some of the ways we've been involved in the solar plus storage market. It's great to be here, and I do hope we have questions, and I'm happy to dialogue with some of our colleagues on the panel. So thank you on behalf of CISA. Please check us out. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to you, Carlos, and then I think Matt is up next from Lockheed.
That's right. Thank you very much, Alex, for your presentation. And yes, Matt, you are up next. So whenever you are ready to start sharing your screen, there we go. I can see it well. So over to you.
Great. Hopefully you guys can hear me, and excited to be talking to you today about a technology that we think is well suited for helping to deal with that duck curve that Alex talked about, and really pair well with utility scale storage. So Lockheed Martin has been in energy storage for a bit now. We first started with integrated lithium ion as a product to understand the market better. But we've moved into a new area and are developing and commercializing a new type of flow battery. The flow battery gives us flexibility, durability, and safety that is not as achievable with a lithium ion solution. And we've designed this flow battery around a proprietary coordination chemistry or an engineered electrolyte that Lockheed's developed. This first slide here just shows a rendering of what we expect a 10 megawatt by 10 hour plant to look like. You can see there's large tanks that are used to store the liquid electrolytes, and then there are shipping containers in front. Those are where the battery stacks are located. For folks who aren't as familiar with Redox flow batteries, I wanted to spend a second here just walking through why this architecture of battery is different. So as opposed to a sealed battery, like a lithium ion or a lead acid battery, you have some flexibility with a flow battery because the liquid electrolytes are stored in large format tanks outside of the battery stacks. So you can right size the power and the energy, essentially decoupling those and allowing you to go to longer durations at a lower marginal cost. And this is really what's needed as you get up past 8 to 10 to 12 hours of energy storage. When you try to do that with lithium ion, it's much more challenging, and essentially you overbuild the power componentry of the battery. Additionally, one big advantage for a flow battery is that your capacity degradation isn't tied to the duty cycle. I think a lot of folks in the industry are quite aware that for lithium-ion product, you typically have a very stipulated duty cycle, and if you go outside of that, you're going to violate the terms of the contract. You get flexibility with a flow battery because you don't necessarily have that constraint. Traditionally, there have been some issues with redox flow batteries. Folks are probably aware of the vanadium technology. Those issues are associated with capacity degradation due to crossover of the electrolytes. So the one electrolyte crosses through a membrane into the other electrolyte. And also with safety concerns, because typically you need to use a strong acid to dissolve the electrolyte. Lockheed Martin has developed a new chemistry where we basically use water and coordination complexes rather than metal ions and strong acids. And the result is that our pH is slightly basic, but much closer to neutral than you see with a traditional vanadium flow battery. And we also get enhanced performance. So because we're using an engineered electrolyte, we don't have the same supply chain constraints that have challenged the vanadium battery manufacturers. Additionally, we have lower crossover through two mechanisms. First, the molecule itself is a little bit bigger, and second, the complexes and the membranes are both negatively charged. So the molecule doesn't want to pass through that membrane. What this means is essentially we can get a more affordable balance of plant with a more robust supply chain and have a non-flammable electrolyte, so you don't have the fire risk that you might have with other energy storage solutions. It boils down to these advantages. We're really targeting long duration, which pairs well with where solar plus storage is going. It's a durable solution that is flexible. We see the battery being used for daily cycling, but you can also do some more rapid cycling with the flow battery if you needed to do, for example, a little bit of frequency response. And you can also do longer storage, just basically hold the charge for a week if you needed to as well with this type of battery. The technology is cost competitive with lithium ion when you look at the total cost of ownership, because you don't need to augment or overbuild since you don't have the same capacity degradation mechanisms you have with lithium ion. It's safe. And the other big advantage is it comes with the Lockheed Martin reputation and guarantee. So that is helpful for getting it financed and built in the field. In terms of where we are today in the commercialization process, we've built up a manufacturing facility, a 95,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Andover, Massachusetts. And we recently, at the end of last year, commissioned a 2.5 megawatt hour battery. This can either be a 5-hour 500 kilowatt battery or a 10-hour 250 kilowatt hour battery, depending on how many of the power modules you are running. And we're testing and verifying the system to make sure we get the system performance that our requirements dictate. And then we're using this design, this product variant is going to be the design that's deployed at a couple customer-sided pilots, hopefully in places like California where CESE is working, as well as around North America. And that's kind of the next step in the commercialization of this product. We really think this solution is paired well for helping to do solar plus storage and to be a cost-effective solution for the market for that need. And I'll be happy to take questions as we go into the panel. So thanks for this opportunity to present. I guess I can hand it off now to Jose is next.
Yeah, Carl is next. Yeah. Thank you very much, Matt, for your presentation. So, well, as Matt said, you are welcome. Everyone in the audience is welcome to send in your questions. So, yeah, send them, and we'll go through them during the Q&A. Okay, and Carl, I can see your presentation now. So, is it in presentation mode?
Yes. No, it's PDF, so I'll handle it.
Okay, fine.
Hi. I'm Carl Stills. I'm Vice President of Imperial Valley Development Storage Integration for 8 Minute Solar Energy. 8 Minute Solar Energy is one of the nation's largest solar and energy storage developers, and we have quite a big pipeline. We have 18,000 megawatts of solar under development. We have 24,000 megawatt hours of storage under development, 2,000 megawatts of operating utility scale projects, 4,900 megawatts of solar contracted, 2,500 megawatts hours of storage contracted. We've been pushing the industry forward, things that we're proud of. We really like to develop these things and provide low cost, affordable energy. We've been in business since 2009, and we began developing the nation's largest solar PV cluster in 2011 with our Mount Signal projects, which were Mount Signal 1, 2, and 3, which were 600 megawatts of solar AC. And then in 2016, we brought online the first solar project that beat fossil fuel prices. Actually, our overall solar project LCOEs were beating the variable cost of the fossil fuel projects. And in 2019, we set the record for the lowest cost solar and storage production plants in our Eagle Shadow Mountain, and then turned right around and beat that with the Elan project that is with LADWP up in Kern County, where the solar was under $20 and the solar plus storage was under $40 for 400 megawatts of solar output at the point of interconnect and 1,200 megawatt hours of storage, or 300 megawatts 4 hours storage of lithium ion batteries. I believe those are still the cheapest price going right now. We are a utility scale developer. And as a utility scale developer, we sell into two very different markets. We sell into a vertically integrated market with utilities like LADWP or SMUD or Imperial Irrigation District. But we also sell into load serving entities in the wholesale electric power market, people dealing with the Cal ISO, people in Texas dealing with ERCOT. We sell into both of those. And, you know, the wholesale power market is a lot different from the vertically integrated market. They both have the same functions, but again, it's depending on how the markets are operated. And so the business rules are different in the wholesale market than we would have if we were working with a vertically integrated utility. And as a developer, what we need to do is we need to take a product and put it online and satisfy the conditions of the load serving entity that we're selling it into. What type of functionality are we giving that? Are we giving it for them the term? Are we giving them the output they require for the cost that they require? And then at the same time, we satisfy our tax equity people, are they getting the credits that they need without jeopardizing that? Is the financial groups we're working with, are they receiving the ROI that we tell them about? And we do this by developing the projects and managing the projects from cradle to grave. And we manage a site control, the transmission siting and capacities on the line, our entitlement process. We manage EPCs so that we have scheduled costs, QA, QC taken care of. And so when we sell these projects, it's really critical, especially with solar and storage, that we understand what the load serving entity is going to do, how they're going to use it. Are we able to take the way they're going to use it and be able to control that and manage that in such a way that all the financial aspects of that return the investment for the people that are putting this in. And yes, we can, but it's very delicate and very intricately balanced. There are some issues in the load serving entities in the wholesale markets where between one resource ID that creates some issues in there in the way they charge and discharge outside of what the parameters are set up and the way that the systems are designed. But we're working on market rules to get rid of those or smooth those out. Our company believes in working through the integrated resource plan. Utilities and LSEs generally put these IRPs together, and the system planning will determine the system needs, and we believe the IRP process should be supported. We think that drives the requirements on the system. We also think that what we see right now is storage is absolutely coming out as an absolute necessity in the IRP process. We also believe longer duration storage is coming out as a present requirement. Now, California is adding about 30 gigawatts of renewable and storage. And I was asked to speak, why are we in the business? Well, we're in the business to satisfy a need and to make money. But the requirements here in California are huge. 30 gigawatts of renewable and storage between now and in 2030. And if you're familiar with the California market, you're also familiar with the CPUC just had a ruling on 2024 to 26 system RA requirements that are in addition to this 30 gigawatts of renewable and storage for another 4,715 to 10,423 megawatts by 2026, and 1,000 megawatts of that will be long duration storage. Now, that's only California. Now we have Biden's plan. And in Biden's plan, if he gets it passed, again, we're going into subsidies, tax credits. He plans to extend the ITC for up to 10 years. He's looking at direct funding of ITC. Tax equity is getting harder to find. People have used up a lot of the tax equity requirements that they need. So we need to do something. Direct funding will help that. And it will allow us to get funds to take the place of tax equity, but it won't take the place of all tax equity. It'll just minimize the amount of tax equity that is required. And then they're looking at possibly ITC for standalone storage and high voltage transmission, and that'll cure a lot of problems on the transmission side and the standalone storage side. The clean electricity standard in his infrastructure bill is going to increase the current 40% requirement of clean electricity to 80% by 2030. That's a 40% increase in the next 9 years. That's really going to be aggressive. And the states are going to generate all electricity from fuels that have zero carbon emissions by 2035. Now, what this means is in 2019, the total annual load was 381,150 thousand megawatt hours. That means you're going to have, 1.5 gigawatt hours of, or 1,524,460,000 megawatt hours increase in a 9-year period across the United States. That would give you somewhere in 174,025 megawatts of base load at 100%, or almost 500,000 if you're at a 35% capacity factor. This is a huge requirement, and it's going to take everybody. It's going to take the whole supply chain to make this work. Developers, contractors, suppliers. This is going to tax everything we know. And with that, I will turn it back over to Carlos.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. I mean, these numbers you've run over there are mind-boggling, really. But yeah, we'll get to we'll talk more about it, during the Q&A. But now I will give the floor to Jose, so you can present. And I'd like to remind everyone in the audience that you can send your questions in. So Jose, if you have your slides ready, you can start sharing.
Thank you, Carlos. You got them?
Yeah, I can see them.
Yeah. Thank you again for the invite. I'm Jose Teyecha from the North American Development Bank. Very briefly, the bank is a U.S. and Mexico government-owned bank that was established in 1994 as a side agreement of NAFTA. And our mission is to support any environmental infrastructure project in the border region. We have a AA1 Moody's rating and a AA by Fitch. So we have access to very good financing that we can, transfer to the projects that we finance. Our offices are located here in San Antonio, Texas, and in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, right next to El Paso. We do have a restriction in terms of the projects that we can finance in terms of geography, and that's the border region. We refine this 62 miles into the U.S. and 300 kilometers into Mexico. That, as you can see in the map, it's a very interesting region because this is actually one of the best regions in the world for both solar and wind resources. So for that reason, we've actually been able to finance quite a few both solar and wind projects in this basically cross-border frame. We've done about 32 projects between wind and solar, over 3 gigawatts. And we've also done, as I mentioned before, a 500 megawatt-hour portfolio deal last year in California, which we believe is the first project financed energy storage portfolio and we did that with another 3 or 4 lenders. It's been a very interesting space for us. This is our main space as of today. We have over $1 billion outstanding in loans in this renewable energy sector between the both countries, and we work with pretty much the big and smaller players, both in terms of lenders, developers, independent engineers, etc. So we're seeing that solar plus storage is really something that we expect to see more and more often in the next projects that we will be financing. It really, adding storage to a solar project really comes down to a case-by-case analysis and that is determined by a lot of factors. The durations, the technologies being used in each project really depend on a lot of factors. So there's really no clear, or specific technology or duration that works for everyone in general. It's more on a case-by-case, but there's definitely right now big interest from most lenders and tax equity providers to get into the space and start adding storage, either standalone or to the solar farms. So it's really a good moment for anyone, any side of the table to be in the space. There is a lot of capital out there. As Carl mentioned, maybe tax equity is being used and has been used a lot, but there's still a lot of tax equity players out there that are looking for the right project. There is, I believe, the last time I heard a figure, there's over 80 lenders in the looking out for opportunities to finance solar, and I think most lenders are getting to the point where they're comfortable on adding some storage, and some lenders also, quite a few, maybe not the biggest ones, but mid-sized lenders are also very comfortable now on analyzing and really considering financing standalone storage projects. So in terms of access to financing, it's a really good time for developers because there's definitely resources out there that we, including NatBank, want to put out there. It's just, again, the analysis is still being done on a case by case, but there's definitely resources out there. And as Carl mentioned, with the addition of potentially having tax equity credits, tax credits for standalone storage project, I believe that's going to push just the whole sector for a better understanding, because we will start seeing a lot of projects. The returns are pretty good already, and adding the option of tax equity and maybe even a back-levered deal where you have regular equity, tax equity, and the lender, then the returns are really attractive for those that are developing those projects. And I'm just gonna say before the Q&A, in terms of pricing, fully contracted projects that have storage, either standalone or with solar, are pretty much getting the same prices than what you would expect for a good solar or wind standalone deal. When you go to the merchant side, then there's definitely a premium that's being paid to get storage included. But again, for fully contracted projects, storage is basically just another renewable energy asset for many banks, and the prices are very much in line with what you would expect with just a solar or a wind deal. So I will leave it at that for now, and hopefully there's a few questions that I can answer alongside the rest of the panelists here.
Thank you very much, Jose, for your presentation. So I think now, well, it's time for the Q&A to start. So I'll add everyone to the stream, and we can start answering questions from the audience. So if you're in the audience and you have a question, just send it now. So let's start with a question here by Agustin. It's a question directed at you, Carl, and saying getting PV plus storage below 40 USD per megawatt hour sounds pretty game changing for most markets. Does that price, $40 per megawatt hour, is that cost based like LCOE, or does it include incentives such as RECs, ancillary services, etc.?
Now that was basically an LCOE, all included, but it did include, because we sold it into a vertically integrated market, it did include all the attributes that went along with it, RA, RECs, energy, ancillary services. But the key when you start looking at that is we had to understand the use case and how that was going to affect the design and the use of that project, and affect the finances on that project. So we worked quite a while with the utility we sold it to understand how they were going to use it, how to get the maximum optimized output out of it for them, and minimize the impacts financially to the project. But that was an LCOE.
Great, thank you very much. So that's interesting, because that's very very attractive. As I understand, in terms of is competitive with other forms of dispatchable energy, isn't it?
Say that again.
So would you say that that level, solar plus storage, is competitive against other forms of dispatchable energy?
Sure. Let me just give you a gas turbine. If I'm looking at gas, right? I'm not looking at an LCOE. I'm looking at my dispatch cost of gas if I'm using spark spread methodology. And the spark spread would say that, okay, I've got a peaking unit. Generally, peaking units are older units that are put into the peaking area, and you're generally less efficient, say 9,000 MMBTUs. If I've got a $3 per MMBTU market, just in the gas, I have 27 per megawatt hour with that type of turbine. Now add your O&M cost to that, add your start-stop cost to that, add your greenhouse gas cost to that, and your variable cost is above $40. So if I can have an LCOE at under 40 and beat the variable cost of the gas turbine, what are we talking about here? Why aren't we replacing all of these turbines?
Right. Well, very interesting. And let's move on to another question, which is on business models, and it's a question directed at Matt. It's from a user called Manuel, and he's asking, what is the business model? He said, arbitrage, are you looking at firming variable renewable energies?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. In terms of our GridStar Flow technology, we're really looking at a variety of business cases. Some key ones that our pilot customers are looking at are bulk renewables integration, so solar plus storage, for example. Resilience is also an interesting one that we are exploring, both for replacing diesel generators and for gas turbine replacements. Areas where you're seeing this are large consumers where they have a premium price placed on keeping the lights on and making sure the grid doesn't go down locally. And then also data centers are also an interesting area where they value resilience. And then finally, the asset has a 20-year design life, and so where we also see customer interest is in transmission and distribution deferral and elimination. So those are kind of the three main areas. I do think it's also important to point out that with a longer duration asset, you have more energy in the tank, essentially. So you have more flexibility there just because you've got a longer potential discharge duration. So one of the things we're working on is similar to what Carl alluded to, right? You really need to stack those values and look at how you can maximize the business case for the customer. So you could, with a flow battery, it's responsive enough to do some frequency regulation. So you could use a portion of the energy capacity to be doing frequency regulation while maintaining a majority for doing daily cycling, and then maybe even on top of that put in a resilience piece, right? Because you've got this larger energy capacity. So those are some of the kind of interesting shifts we're looking at, mainly for the commercial customers, less so for the pilot customers, but those were things we'd be trialing with pilots and then contracting with commercial customers.
Okay, and there is another question here about costs, and it's about the OPEX. So it asks, what's the difference between the OPEX of flow batteries compared to lithium ion?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I think the OPEX for a flow battery is a little bit different. You have pumps and valves and instruments that need to be serviced. You don't have those things on a lithium ion installation. However, as I mentioned, Lockheed is an integrator of lithium ion, and so we've got some good experience with that. And one of the things we found quite challenging with lithium ion is the HVAC systems themselves are mechanical systems that have to be maintained. And I think that's a cost that's often undervalued in terms of the potential OPEX costs for energy storage technologies. So in terms of overall comparison, we look at the total cost of ownership. So you're looking up the upfront cost plus any augmentation or oversizing difference. And then the OPEX on top of that, and we find ourselves pretty competitive on the commercial product as we get out in time. So with where we see lithium ion going, but I'm happy to let any of the other panelists comment on that in terms of the lithium ion OPEX in particular.
Yeah, Carl, please. See, you want to?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting point too, because with the BESS system with lithium ion, again, we go back to the use case. It's really important that you understand how these are going to be used, because they play to the degradation, and that plays to the augmentation schedule, and that plays to your capital going in and your replacement cycles. Case in point, typically you're going to be running, if you're just doing thermal energy degradation, you're going to have something like a 1.5 5.2% degradation per year in a normal cycle with 1 cycle a day, 365 cycles per year. But it depends on how they do it. That's assuming that you're charging that battery and discharging it into the evening load. But if you carry that load over to the morning, you're actually driving your average state of charge up. And the higher you drive that average state of charge up, you're now starting to add some calendar degradation in there, and you start increasing that degradation. It's really important that you look at the difference of this and understand that you have to manage that process.
So, Jose, from the point of view of a lender, so how do you consider these costs? How do you look at the different technologies that there are for storing energy?
Yes, I believe as both Matt and Carl have said, this is really, you need to understand the use case and what exactly the project, how is the battery going to be used, and that's going to make the analysis in terms of degradation, cost, operational cost, etc., way different, right? So the business case that can be made with batteries, the business cases that can be made are very different. But what I do think it's definitely, there's a multitude of revenue streams, especially in California. You have ancillary services, you have energy arbitrage, you have, RA everything. And all of those, the lenders are comfortable and are understanding the markets now to where you give value to all of those. It's also a very difficult work to fine tune the strategy, because some products are kind of an either or. So if you're offering certain products, you cannot offer others, depending on the use of the battery. And so the analysis definitely becomes, for the lenders, becomes a little bit more complex. But I do believe that nowadays there's a lot of lenders out there that feel comfortable doing that analysis. And as long as you have a strong guarantees in terms of battery performance and insurance, and you feel comfortable with the forecast, I do believe most of the technologies have a space for lenders to start looking into any project in a serious way.
Okay. You're muted. Carlos, you're muted.
Oh, yeah. So I was just saying, please, Carl, go ahead.
And let me add something to that, because it's the use case too, but you have to tie the right parameters in your contracts and your PPAs. It's really important that you have those parameters in there and that they understand it ties the parameters around there. And if you exceed this, there's got to be compensation for it, because again, average state of charge, cycles per day, cycles per year, those are things you really have to understand and how you control them.
I would add that, in California, as we see the penetrations of storage increase, we know that they will no longer be pursuing just the regulation service, because the market for that is small. So as we move forward, we're going to see much more storage pursuing what I call a deep cycling case. And this is kind of what I showed with the duct chart, where the ISO is going to really need storage that cycles every day, absorbs solar when there's solar, and then pushes it out. And I think we're going to see perhaps different technologies better suited for that than others. And so the developers like 8 Minute will be looking to sort of see what fits, and the more visibility they have, the better. And interestingly, even as we speak here today, the CAISO is looking at a more standard load shifting product. And I focus on that because if you go back to wind and solar, one of the reasons the banks felt good lending, and it was very enabled by a simple contractual structure of the PPA, where the banks could say, here's the value for the PPA, someone's going to take the risk and go into the market, but it was very predictable. And if we can get storage to having similar predictability with a use case and a very fungible, understandable load shifting product, like every day you load shift 10 megawatt hours, whatever it is. The banks can wrap their head around that. There's a fixed 10-year contract around that, and everything starts to get easier. The financing costs come down, and then someone takes that fixed product and they go into the market and they take some risk. But there's groups that like that, and there's groups that don't like that. So we have to partition that and make the contractual structure easy for the banks to know what parts they like, and the risk takers to take their risks, et cetera. So we're working on all that right now, and I think that's going to further unlock the Western U.S. market.
Actually, I have a slide on that if I can share it, because it's really, and Alex, it goes back to our 1 resource ID versus 2 resource ID. And we've talked about that forever. But let me share this slide with you, and I'll show you what some of the problems are with the risk, okay?
Yeah. And then, Jose, it'd be great to hear your, I know you're representing not only your bank, but all banks here. When you look at that, how does it impede you, or how many basis points of risk does that equate to, sort of roughly, in terms of costs? Because I think Californians, we're about to spend billions of dollars on storage. And if we can shave a few basis points on the cost, that's a good deal for us. And so we're very interested to reduce the risks through smart market design. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, and this is a site hybrid co-located solar and storage. And this is some of the market rule changes. And what happens here is that if you look at this, the PV megawatts are the yellow, they're coming up, and you have the variability up in here. And then the PV plus output is the green. And as you experience that variability, the output actually discharges down and experience that, because you're not charging, or not supposed to be charging the battery. Something's going to happen. But if you receive an ISO command, right, and let's say you're going 45 megawatts down, at the same time your output drops down and your charging drops down. This light pink one right here is your average data charge. If you notice, it's still charging even though you've dropped down where you're satisfying the command, but you no longer have charge voltage. This right here means that you're charging from the grid. Can you see that?
Yeah, we see it, Carl.
Okay, so if you're charging from the grid, now I can stop sharing that, but if you're charging from the grid, now you go back to the ITC and the way the ITC rules are out there, okay? Now, if you're charging from the grid in that 30%, you're going to reduce that ITC by the amount you're charging from the grid. So let's say you trying to realize 30% ITC, but over the year, you've got 5% charging from the grid. You're now at 95% of that ITC. There's a clawback provision for them getting that ITC, and then that ITC stays at 95%. So that is an issue that we have to mitigate. We've got to get the wholesale markets to operate these things within the parameters so that they don't risk that ITC, because that's necessary for the financial investors to come in and realize the return on investment that they're getting.
So, say, I see you want to bring, please.
Yeah, and I think that's the first to Carl's point. I think that's where it's going to be really key to see what's going to happen with the tax credits for standalone, because then you won't really depend on how you're charging the battery to credit those incentives. So and in terms of pricing, I don't think kind of going towards Alex's question, I don't know if there's enough information out there to say this is the standard right now in terms of, for example, standalone storage. But as I mentioned before, I do think right now, especially capacity contracts are very safe in terms of the lender's perspective. So California is one of the states that are really pioneers in this sense, and we're seeing projects with capacity payments, which basically means as long as you have the battery available, then you kind of have a guaranteed payment. So that really helps incentivize just the financing. And I can tell you, those from my experience, what I've seen, People are getting maybe a third of their revenues at least from the capacity payments and capacity contracts. So that really sets, kind of a stepping stone for everybody to kind of being able to determine what the revenues are going to be from those projects. And then in California, you have a very strong market for the ancillary services. But definitely, as contracts get more widely used and kind of more kind of a standard form, that's going to help lower the price for risk. That's definitely I think that's going to happen. But again, if you have strong contracts, you really adding or not adding storage from what we've seen in the market doesn't really impact the price. You're still gonna get really good spreads that are probably under 175 or maybe under 150, depending on the economics of the project and the risks. If you go to the kind of the fully merchant, we have heard that there's commercial lenders out there. I've spoken with them directly that are financing fully merchant deals with either standalone or strong storage component. And those are definitely, there's two limits. The first is the overall leverage, probably closer to a third only in debt. And then you have the spreads, which are, I wouldn't be able to say those are kind of standard. So I think it has been so far dependent on everybody's own negotiations, but we're definitely looking at least double or more the spread that you would have for a contracted project. So tax equity coming into play will definitely make the economics better for everyone and the overall cost of financing for a developer significantly lower. So we just hope as lenders that we can remain competitive in structures where you have, again, a back leverage structure with tax equity and the developer's equity. And I think it's going to be a win-win for everyone. But there's definitely strong business case for a lot of technologies right now.
And well, those all very good points. I wanted to ask you actually, in the few minutes we have remaining, about the stakeholder consultation process that Kaiser launched last week, if I'm not mistaken. So to optimize the market for storage. What can we expect? What kind of reforms could we expect coming out of this?
Yeah, there's a few, and happy to talk about this. I'm a big fan of the CAISO, and we've engaged with them for years on a lot of these issues. The issue here is that as they start to rely on storage for reliability, particularly on very hot days, they want to know that the storage is charged and ready to go. And so how do they set that up? And I think a simple example is you set up an energy shifting contract where the storage agrees to this energy shifting. Another angle is to sign up for capacity obligations where you have a must offer obligation. In our real-time market, though, there are technology limitations where the market itself doesn't look far ahead. It only looks a short period of time ahead. And so that can create some dispatch of the storage that is suboptimal, particularly if you're heading into a really hot late afternoon period. So the ISO is working on that. And what they have done is they've said, for 2 years, we're going to have this physical manual control capability to control your state of charge. But in the meantime, we're going to work on this with the stakeholders like CISA and the storage developers to really hammer out how we can help you be fully participating in the real-time market and delivering flexibility and helping with reliability. And on top of that, if the ISO does physically control your storage unit suboptimally, how do they give you money to cover your costs? So we call that bid cost recovery. So we're really in the middle of all of this. And I think what it will show is that having longer energy in the fuel tank, like the GridStar Flow, hedges the storage resource to be better able to manage the market uncertainty in real time. And so I think we'll see some new contractual structures. We'll see some new market products like a energy shifting product, and then we'll see developers putting all that together and wanting to have a little slightly different packaging of storage, probably with more energy duration. And I think in California and in other sunny areas, we'll continue to see the first generation of storage will be shorter duration. The next generation will be longer generation. And to Jose's point, you have to have a capacity structure that's really transparent there so that the banks can lend. And so all of that's coming and going to happen in the next year and a half, maybe 2 years here. And, very exciting. And hopefully California will do a good job, and the other parts of the country or the world can learn and maybe even do it better. So that's what we're working on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. And think that, well, we've pretty much run out of time. It's been very interesting chatting with you today and learning from you. And I'd like to thank all of you for being with us today, and everyone in the audience as well for watching us. So as always, we'll share the recording of the webinar, and we'll forward the questions to the panelists so they can answer them if they find the time. And well, I don't know if you'd like to share anything with the audience before we leave.
I see one question I can answer real quick. It'd take me a second.
Go for it.
The difference between AC and DC coupling, we generally use AC right now because you want your DC to be next to your inverters. So you want and that's going to distribute it. If we're doing 3,000 acres of solar, our cabling costs are going to go up tremendously if you use DC coupling. So we use AC.
Fair enough. All right. So any parting words for the audience from any of you?
Well, I would just say to everyone, I'd love to chat and learn how you're doing if you have any ideas. And otherwise, California is going to be trying to figure this out. And we sometimes do things quickly and make mistakes. So the more the merrier to help us figure all this out would be great and very welcome. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Alex. And Jose, please.
Thank you everyone for your time. And of course, if you happen to have a project or a potential project within the border region, please feel free to reach out. And also, if you have just general questions about financing, I'm always glad to take some time as part of our role as a development bank. It's just always glad. I'm more than happy to just reach out and answer any questions in terms of understanding where the financing is and how you can reach that financing sources.
Thank you very much, Jose. And Matt?
Yeah, no, thanks as well to everybody who was able to attend today. And to Alex's point, I think you're going to see some interesting evolution on the market side. I also think you're going to see some evolution on the technology side. So happy to follow up with anybody who wants to learn more about flow batteries and our technology in particular, or any of the other kind of competing energy storage technologies that are out there emerging today.
Thank you very much, Matt. And once again, thank you to everyone in the audience. And we're gonna go now. See you next time.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.